One of those 10 secrets for success and inner peace is that you can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. And know this, that your mind created everything in your life that you call a problem. And self-actualizing, highly functioning people who live at these extremely extraordinarily high levels of consciousness never put their thoughts on what is if they don't like what is. Because if your thoughts are on what is and you despise what is, and if you look at poor people, if you look at unsuccessful people, if you look at sickly people, if you look at tired people, if you look at addicted people, you will see people who put their attention constantly on their problems, on what is wrong, on what isn't working, on what I can't do, and so on. They'll tell you about it, they'll focus on it. And when your thoughts are on what is and what you think about is what expands, you continue to attract more of what is into your life. When I had a practice, I had a woman who came to me who said, I just went through a divorce 7 months ago, and I've been dating, and I've dated 4 different men, and all 4 of them have used me as a sex object, and every single one of them called me up after the first date and, were mistreating me, and they didn't have any respect for me, and that was the end of it. And she said, I'd like you to talk to all 4 of these men. And I said, there's only one common denominator here. You are attracting into your life what you are putting your attention on. It's called the job effect. You can't think about what is missing, and you can't think and put your energy and talk about what is. If you don't like what is, can't do that unless you want more of that to show up. Third, you cannot put your attention or your thoughts or your energy on what always has been. If you put your thoughts or your energy on what always has been is what will continue to show up into your life. What always has been is the wake of a boat. Your life is a boat. It's heading up the river in that direction, and is heading there at 40 knots. And you're standing on the stern, and you're looking down at the water. And as the boat goes in this direction here, you are looking down into the water. And what do you see? You see the wake. And what is the wake? The wake is the trail that is left behind. That's what the wake of your life is. That's what the wake of the boat is. And if you ask yourself the question, what's driving the boat? What's making this thing head in this direction? The answer is the present moment. Energy that is being generated by the engine and nothing more is what's making the boat go in this direction. And then if you ask yourself this key question, is it possible for the wake to drive the boat? Can a trail that is left behind make a boat go in this direction? What's the answer? Impossible, isn't it? And so too, is it impossible for the wake of your life, the trail that you've left behind, to be the reason why your life is going in this direction? It is not because of anything that has happened back here. That's an illusion that we live under. What has happened back here is a trail, the choices you make in this moment. And if your thoughts are on what always has been, this is the way we've always done things, this is the kind of person I am, I can't change, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. All of those cliches that have become so much a part of our life, if your thoughts are on what always has been and you despise what always has been, you will continue to attract more of what always has been. Even though you despise it, it works that way, so you can't think about what's missing, what is, and what always has been, and it gets worse. You cannot think about and put your attention on what they want or expect for you. If you want that to change in your life, and there's no shortage of people who have an opinion about what it is that you should be or shouldn't be or how you should be doing it, most of these are your relatives. I have a wonderful book in mind to write. It's called Your Friends Are God's Way of Apologizing for Your Relatives, but if I talk to your relatives, they laugh too. So we all have this idea that the reason I'm not getting where I'd like to be, particularly with young people and working with young people over you, it's because my parents want this and my parents think that and my parents won't let me do this. And I always say, well, but why are you so attached to what your parents think? Well, these are my parents and I have to do it. I said, you can listen to it, you can take it in, but you don't have to embrace it. You don't have to follow by that. And certainly when you become adults, when if there are people out there who convince you that you should or shouldn't be doing this or that, then you're going to continue to attract exactly what it is that they have their attention on. So if you put your thoughts on what they want for you, you tell everybody else about how it makes you go from being bliss to pissed just by being in their presence, just by bidding on the telephone with them, that person, that in-law, that mother, that father, that grandparent, that child, that whoever it might be is giving you, or even your neighbors or your friends or whomever, your coworkers are telling you what you should or shouldn't be. And you don't like the advice that they're giving, and you resent very strongly one of the 10 secrets for success. And the inner peace says, there are no justified resentments. The third principle is one of my very favorites. It's called, there are no justified resentments. This is a very difficult principle for many people to get, but one I believe very strongly in. I was in a group one time of drug addicts and alcoholics, and I was one of the people, a sponsor, in leading this group, and the sign on the wall said, "There are no justified resentments in this group." What I said to that group that night was, no matter what anybody says to you here, no matter what kind of anger comes directed towards you, no matter how much hate you may encounter showing up in your life, there are no justified resentments. Meaning that if you carry around resentment inside of you about anything or anyone, and I'm talking about the person you lent money to and hasn't paid you back, I'm talking about the person in your life that you feel was abusive in your life, I'm talking about the person who walked out on you and left you for somebody else, I'm talking about all of these things that you have justified in your heart and in your life that you have the right to be resentful about. I'm suggesting to you that those resentments will end up harming you and creating in you a sense of despair. I've often said that no one ever dies from a snake bite. The snake bite will never kill you. You cannot be unbitten once you are bitten. It's the venom that continues to pour through your system after the bite that will end up destroying you. Now, you have to take a look at all the resentment you may have in your life, and I would like to suggest to you that I think there is a wonderful metaphor for this that I have created in my life for how to make this work. I think that Regis Philbin is responsible for it. My buddy Regis, there's a show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, that's been popular all over the world. I've been in South Africa, and it comes on. In Australia, they have their own Australian version. In Greece, they have the Greek edition, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Basically, this show has two levels that you have to get to. The first level is the S1000 level. At the S1000 level, you have to answer a question like, on your hand, you have some digits. Those digits on your hand are called your feet, your nose, your ears, or your fingers. Everyone who ever goes on this show has the horrible dread that they are going to go out on one of those questions. Basically, in order to get to the $1,000 level, all you have to do is answer 5 pretty simple questions in order to get to the $1,000 level. Now, in this program, the $1,000 level of this program, using this metaphor, means that you will leave with something if you get this. At least get this. This is the $1,000 level. Quote, you must send blame for any conditions in your life. Blame has to go. So, all right. Blame means that if you are sitting there with a disease, you say, without guilt, it's mine, I take responsibility. This means that if you have been through any tough circumstances in your life, this means that if you're minimal amounts of financial security in your life, this means that if your children don't get along with you, this means that if your neighbors are taking up a petition to get you out of the neighborhood, whatever it might be that's going on in your life, you name it, and everybody across this country, across this world, has a series of these things that you're willing to say, I am here because of the choices I have made. Right now I am willing to say that. Even thought it's difficult, and we know it's really not your fault. We know really that there's a lot of people who are really bad. You're willing to say, no blame. That's the first level, right? That's where you understand there's not justified resentment. Then on the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire show, there is what is called the $32,000 level. The $32,000 level is not only an opportunity for you to walk away with a sizable amount of goodies, which you can walk away with tonight from this program. It is also the door opener to multi-wealth that you have to get to in order to have an opportunity to move into the transcendent level. This $32,000 level question comes to this. It came to me from a quotation that I write in Spiritual Solutions to Every Problem. I read a book that was written a couple of thousand years ago by Patanjali, the Yoga Sutras, the aphorisms of Patanjali. One of those aphorisms and observations that this brilliant man made almost 2,000 years ago was this. He said, if you become steadfast in your abstention from thoughts of harm directed towards others, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. This translates to blame. Pretty basic. I'm just not going to assign responsibility to other people for where I am, because now I have an opportunity to get rid of it. If I think someone else caused it, then I've got to wait for someone else to change in order for me to get rid of it, and you might wait forever for that. But if I take responsibility for it, I can do something, including move on, which might be the most important thing to do. But at the higher level, when there are no justified reasons for resentment, what you are doing is what St. Francis did. What you are doing is you are at a place where you are sending love in response to hate. You are literally saying, no matter what comes my way, I am going to be steadfast in my abstention from thoughts of harm directed to others. I'm going to work hard no matter what comes my way, having come out of me what I want to come out of me. That is love, and that is a higher energy. If you can get to that level, Patanjali said, all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in your presence. I have a little girl. I have 6 precious girls and 2 precious sons, but I have a little girl, and she is almost 12. She loves animals like no one I have ever met in my life. Her whole life revolves around animals. When we walk in, the woods butterflies avoid me, fly away from people around, and they come and land right on her arm. It happens all the time. She couldn't have a thought of harm directed toward any living creature. And Patanjali said to us, all living creatures will cease to feel fear or enmity or anger in the presence of those who can send love in response to hate. That's what I mean when I say there are no justified resentments. What I'd like to do is share with you a story. It's a little story, a tender story that was sent to me, who sends me beautiful things in the mail. I call it the Teddy story. I'd like to read this to you if I can do it without tearing up. This story illustrates as well as anything I have ever seen. There's a story many years ago of an elementary teacher. Her name was Mrs. Thompson. As she stood in front of her 5th grade class on the first day school, she told the children a lie. Like most teachers, she looked at her students and said she loved them all the same. That was impossible because there in the front row, slumped in his seat, was a little boy named Teddy Stoddard. Mrs. Thompson had watched Teddy the year before and noticed that he didn't play well with the other children, that his clothes were messy, that he constantly needed a bath. Teddy could be unpleasant. It got to the point where Mrs. Thompson would actually take delight in marking his papers with a broad red pen with big X's and putting a big F at the top of his papers. At the school where Mrs. Thompson taught, she was required to review each child's past record, and she put Teddy's off till last. However, when she reviewed his file, she was in for a surprise. Teddy's 1st grade teacher wrote, Teddy is a bright child. He has a ready laugh. He does his work neatly and has good manners. He's a joy to be around. The 2nd grade teacher wrote, Teddy's an excellent student, well liked by his classmates, but he's troubled because his mother has a terminal illness. A life at home must be a struggle. His 3rd grade teacher wrote, his mother's death has been hard on him. He tries to do his best, but his father doesn't show much interest, and his home life will soon affect him if steps aren't taken. Teddy's 4th grade teacher wrote, Teddy's withdrawn and doesn't show much interest in school. He doesn't have many friends, and sometimes he even sleeps in class. By now, Mrs. Thompson realized the problem, and she was ashamed of herself. She felt even worse when her students brought her Christmas presents wrapped in beautiful ribbons and bright paper, except for Teddy. His present was clumsily wrapped in heavy brown paper that he got from the grocery bag. Mrs. Thompson took pains to open it in the middle of the other presents. Some of the children started to laugh when she found a rhinestone bracelet with some of the rhinestones missing and a bottle that was 1/4 of perfume. She stifled her children's laughter when she claimed how pretty the bracelet was, putting it on and dabbing some of the perfume on her wrist. Teddy Stoddard stayed after school that day just long enough to say, Mrs. Thompson, today you smelled just like my mom used to. After the children left, she cried for at least an hour. On the very day she quit teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic, and instead she began to teach children. She paid particular attention to Teddy as she worked with his mind seemed to come alive. The more she encouraged him, the faster he responded. By the end of the year, Teddy had become one of the smartest children in the class, and despite her lie, became one of her teacher's pets. A year later, she found a note under the door from Teddy telling her that she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 6 years went by before she got another note from Teddy. He then wrote that he had finished high school 3rd in his class, and she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 years after that, she got another letter saying that while things had been tough at times, he stayed in school and stuck with it. He would soon graduate from college with the highest of honors. He assured Mrs. Thompson she was still the best teacher he ever had in his whole life. 4 more years passed, and another letter came. This time he explained that after he got his bachelor's degree, he decided to go a little further. The letter explained that she was still the best and favorite teacher he ever had, but now his name was a little longer. It was signed Theodore M. Stoddard, M.D. The story doesn't end there. You see, there was yet another letter that spring. Teddy said he had met this girl and they were going to be married. He explained that his father had died a couple of years ago, and he was wondering if Mrs. Thompson might agree to sit in the place at the wedding that was usually reserved for the mother of the groom. Of course, Mrs. Thompson did, and guess what? She wore that bracelet, the one with the several rhinestones missing. She made sure she was wearing the perfume that Teddy remembered his mother wearing on their last Christmas together. They hugged each other, and Dr. Stoddard whispered in Mrs. Thompson's ear, "Thank you so much for making me feel important and telling me I could make a difference." Mrs. Thompson whispered with tears in her eyes, "Teddy, you have it all wrong. You are the one who taught me that I could make a difference. I didn't know how to teach until I met you." Isn't that a beautiful story that symbolizes there are no justified resentments? Work at reaching that $32,000 level, the place where the only thing you have to send is love, because that's what's inside. That's the message of our greatest spiritual teachers. That's all they ever had to give away.